industry's
By the age of
aesthetics
31,
during the Clinton
Kate Moss had already
administration.
shaped an era.
Again, Kate was
Her
not
image
named,
was everywhere.
but she did not
Runways,
need to be.
magazine covers,
Everyone
global
understood who
campaigns.
was being
And yet the
blamed.
story behind that image
While
was far
magazines
more
publicly
complex than
distanced
what the public
themselves from
saw.
heroin
She
chic,
wasn't just a model.
they continued
She
to book
became
her
a symbol of an
privately.
entire cultural
Controversy
shift.
increased her
But
value
symbols
even as
come
it
with
destroyed
pressure.
her
And in her
reputation.
case, that
Kate
pressure had been
responded
building
by
quietly
withdrawing.
for years.
She stopped giving interviews,
When the backlash
stopped explaining
eventually
herself,
came,
stopped
it felt
asking
sudden
to
to
be
the
understood.
outside world.
Silence
But in
became a
reality,
form of
it was the
armor.
result
The
of a
more she
long,
said nothing,
unspoken
the more
strain that had
powerful
been
her
part of
image
her life
became.
since the very
But
beginning
that
of her
silence
career.
came at a cost.
Long before fame found her,
Anxiety
Kate's
did not
life had already been
disappear.
marked by
It settled
instability.
deeper.
Growing
And
up in
beneath
South
the success,
London,
the pressure
she
continued to
experienced a
build
family separation
quietly,
at a young age that
relentlessly,
shaped her
until it would
emotional
finally
world.
explode
At just
years later
13,
in a way
she
no one
watched
could
her parents
ignore.
split,
The
and that
night
disruption introduced a sense of
everything
uncertainty
collapsed.
that would follow her into
By the
adulthood. It
mid-2000s,
wasn't a
Kate Moss
glamorous
had
childhood,
survived
and
nearly
it
every
certainly
kind of
wasn't one that
scrutiny the
prepared her for
fashion
the
world could
intense
throw at
scrutiny
her.
of global fame.
She had outlasted the heroin chic
Instead, she
panic,
entered her
the political
teenage years already
condemnation, and
navigating
years of
emotional
public judgment.
complexity, without the
Outwardly,
support
she
systems
was
that
still
might have
working
helped her process
constantly,
it.
fronting
Her
luxury
discovery at
campaigns,
14
appearing
felt
on
almost
magazine covers,
accidental,
and
yet it
earning
changed
millions.
everything.
But
Spotted by
privately,
a modeling
the strain
agent,
had never
she was
lifted.
quickly drawn into an
Anxiety
industry
had
that
followed
moved
her from
faster than she
adolescence
could
into
fully
adulthood,
understand.
and the industry she
Suddenly,
worked
she
in
was
offered
traveling
one
alone,
consistent
attending
escape:
castings,
drugs that were
and entering
everywhere
adult
and quietly
environments while still
tolerated,
very
as
much a
long as they
child.
stayed
There
invisible.
were few
On a
protections
Thursday
in
night
place,
in
and
mid-September
even fewer conversations
2005,
about boundaries.
Kate was at a recording
The
studio in
modeling
West
world of that
London
time
with her
prioritized
then-boyfriend,
results over
Pete
well-being,
Doherty.
and
It
Kate
was
was
not an
expected to
unusual
adapt
setting
quickly
for
or
her
risk
social
being
circle.
left behind.
Music,
As her career
alcohol,
began
and
to rise,
cocaine were
the
routine in
demands
those
increased just
spaces,
as rapidly.
shared openly by
Photo shoots became
musicians,
more frequent and
photographers,
often more revealing,
stylists, and
pushing her far
executives
outside her
alike.
comfort zone.
What was
While
different
the
that
images
night
were
was not
praised
what
for
she
their
did,
rawness and
but that
honesty,
someone
the
filmed
emotional
it.
cost to her
In less
was
than a
rarely
minute, a
acknowledged.
private
She
moment
later
became
spoke about
evidence.
feeling vulnerable and
5 days
overwhelmed,
later, on
yet
September
those feelings
20th,
were treated
British
as secondary
tabloids
to the
published
success she
grainy
was achieving.
photographs of Kate
The
using
industry
cocaine.
rewarded her
The
ability to
headline,
endure
"Cocaine
discomfort,
Kate," exploded
reinforcing a
across
cycle where
newspapers before
vulnerability
most of the
became
fashion
part of her
industry had
professional
even
identity.
woken up.
By
Her
the
phone
early
began ringing
1990s,
early that
Kate
morning
Moss had
and
become a
did not
defining
stop.
figure in
Within
fashion.
hours,
She didn't fit the
brands that had
traditional mold of
celebrated
the
her for
time,
years
which made her both
moved to protect
groundbreaking
themselves.
and controversial.
H&M
Her look
ended a
challenged
multi-million-pound
existing beauty
contract
standards,
before lunch.
introducing a more
Burberry
understated,
followed.
less polished
Chanel did
aesthetic.
not call at
While
all.
many
They
celebrated
issued a
this shift,
statement and walked
others viewed it
away.
as
The
problematic.
speed was shocking.
Critics
In
began
under
to attach
72
broader
hours, Kate
cultural
Moss went
concerns
from
to her
being
image,
untouchable
turning
to
her into a focal
radioactive.
point for
The same
debates
press that once
extended
praised
far
her
beyond
cool
her control.
detachment now questioned her
The
fitness
term
as a
heroin
mother.
chic
Photographers
became one
camped
of the most
outside her
controversial
home.
labels associated
Rumors
with her.
circulated that
Although
social
she never
services
created
might
or endorsed
intervene
it, the
and take
media
her
linked
young
it
daughter
closely to her
away.
appearance.
That threat,
This
not the
association
loss of
placed
money
her at
or
the center of a
status,
cultural
was what
backlash
truly
that
terrified
questioned the
her.
values of the fashion
Kate issued a
industry
short
itself.
public apology,
Suddenly,
accepting
she was no longer
responsibility
just
and
a model.
announcing she would
She
seek
was being
help.
held
But
responsible for
privately,
societal
she was
concerns
furious.
about body image
Years
and youth
later, she
culture.
would describe the
It
experience
was a
as
heavy
deeply
burden for
hypocritical.
someone who had
Everyone
entered the
she knew
industry
took
as a
drugs.
teenager.
The industry functioned
Public
on them.
reaction grew
Yet
increasingly
when the images
intense.
appeared,
People
she
projected their
alone was
fears
chosen
and
to be
frustrations
punished.
onto her,
Once
often without
again,
understanding
she
her
became the
reality.
scapegoat.
Encounters
This
in
time
public
not
became
for an
difficult,
aesthetic,
with
but
strangers
for an
confronting
addiction
her
culture
about
that had
issues she had
always
no
been
control
there.
over.
The
Despite the
collapse was
criticism,
total.
she continued
And for
to
the
work,
first time,
maintaining
there was
a
no
professional
silence
presence
left
while
to
privately
hide
dealing with
behind.
anxiety that had been building
Rehab,
for years.
survival, and the
Silence
price
became her
of being
coping
forgiven.
mechanism, allowing her to
When Kate
maintain
Moss
distance
boarded
from
a
the
flight
noise
to
surrounding her.
Arizona in October
As the years
2005,
passed,
there
Kate
was no
remained a
guarantee
dominant
she would
force in
return
fashion,
to the life
but
she
the
had
pressure
known.
never truly eased.
She entered the
Behind the
Meadows,
scenes,
a
the
rehabilitation
environment she
center
worked
far
in often
removed from
normalized
London's
behaviors
clubs,
that would later
studios, and
become
cameras.
sources of
This was
controversy.
not a celebrity retreat
Substances were
designed to
present,
soften
and their use was
consequences.
rarely
It
questioned
was
as long as
structured,
it didn't disrupt
isolating, and
business. This
confrontational.
normalization
For the first
created
time
a
in
culture
years,
where boundaries
Kate
were
was forced
blurred,
to stop
and
moving,
consequences were
stop
often
working,
ignored
and
until they
sit
could
with
no
the
longer be
anxiety anxiety that had driven her long before
Everything changed in
cocaine ever
2005.
entered the story.
A private moment became
She had been in
public,
treatment
and the
once
reaction
before,
was
years
immediate.
earlier, for
Images of her
exhaustion.
using drugs
That
were
stay
published
had been
widely,
chaotic and
sparking a media
unfinished,
storm that
marked
spread
more
across
by
the world.
crisis than
The
reflection.
response from brands
This
was
time was
swift
different.
and decisive.
The stakes were
Contracts
higher.
were terminated,
Her reputation was in
partnerships
ruins,
dissolved,
her
and her
income
reputation was
uncertain,
called into
and her
question
greatest fear,
almost overnight.
losing her
It
daughter,
was a stark
hung
reminder
over
of
every
how
decision.
quickly public perception
Rehab
could shift.
became less about
Among
detox
those
and more
connected
about
to her at the
survival,
time was Pete
learning how to
Doherty,
exist
whose
without
lifestyle
numbness,
added another
without
layer of
constant constant
scrutiny to the
external
situation.
validation,
Their
without the
relationship
noise that
became
had
part of
drowned
the
out her
narrative,
panic for
further
decades.
intensifying media attention.
While Kate was in
While
the
the
desert,
details were widely
something
discussed,
unexpected
the
happened
deeper
back in London.
context of industry
Fashion,
culture remained
which had publicly
largely
distanced
ignored.
itself from
The
her,
focus stayed
began
on her,
quietly preparing her
reinforcing the
return.
idea that she alone
Designers
was
talked
responsible for what had
privately,
happened.
editors waited,
In the days
and then
that
Alexander
followed, the
McQueen
impact
sent a
was
message the
overwhelming.
industry could not
Media
ignore.
coverage was
At his
relentless,
spring
and
show,
speculation
models
about her
walked wearing
personal
shirts
life
that read,
intensified.
"We love you, Kate."
Questions were
It was
raised
not
about her
subtle,
role as a
it was
mother,
defiant,
adding a deeply
and it
personal
exposed the
dimension
truth
to
behind the
public
moral
scrutiny.
outrage.
This
Fashion
aspect of the
did not want
situation
to lose
affected her
her.
more than any
It had simply
professional
needed her to
loss.
disappear
The
long enough for the
possibility of
scandal
losing
to
her
cool.
child introduced a level of fear
When
that
Kate left
reshaped her
rehab and
priorities
returned to
completely.
Britain weeks later, the
Her
phone
decision
started
to
ringing
enter
again,
rehabilitation
but this
marked a
time with
turning point.
offers. Not
Traveling to a
apologies, not
treatment center in
explanations,
Arizona,
just
she stepped
contracts.
away from the environment
French
that had
Vogue
defined her
devoted
life
an
for
entire
years.
issue to
This
her,
period
framing
wasn't
the
just about
scandal not
addressing
as
substance
disgrace,
use.
but as
It was about
dangerous
confronting
beauty.
the deeper issues
Brands that
had
had
been
cut
present long
ties
before the
suddenly
scandal.
rediscovered
For
their
the first
loyalty.
time, she had
Within
the space
months,
to reflect
she
without the
signed more
constant demands
contracts
of her
than she had
career.
held before the collapse.
During her time away, the
Forgiveness came
fashion
quickly,
industry began to
but it
shift
was
its stance.
conditional.
While it had
Kate
initially
understood
distanced
that she
itself,
had not been
signs of
welcomed
support
back
started
because
to
she was
emerge.
healed,
One of the
or
most
because the
notable
industry
moments
had
came from
changed.
Alexander McQueen,
She was welcomed
who
back because
publicly expressed
controversy had
solidarity
increased
in a
her
way that
value.
resonated across the
Redemption,
industry.
it turned out,
It highlighted
was
the complex
profitable.
relationship
The
between
comeback
fashion
that
and
changed her
controversy,
forever.
where rejection and
By
support
early
could exist
2006,
simultaneously.
Kate Moss was officially
When Kate
back.
returned, the
But the
response
word
was
barely
notably
captured
different.
what had happened.
Opportunities
This was
began
not
to
a quiet
reappear,
return
and
or a
brands that
cautious
had
trial
previously
run.
withdrawn
It was
showed
a
renewed
flood.
interest.
Fashion
The
houses
speed
that
of her
had dropped
comeback
her without
raised
warning
questions about
now
the nature
competed
of
for her
forgiveness in the
availability.
industry. It
Campaigns
became
stacked
clear
up.
that her value had not
Editorials
diminished.
framed her as
If
defiant
anything,
rather
the
than
attention
disgraced.
surrounding her had made her
By the
even
end of
more
that year, she was
influential.
voted Model of the
Her
Year
return
by
to
the
work
same
was marked by a
industry
new
that had
level of
treated her
control.
as
She
expendable
approached her
months
career with
earlier.
greater awareness,
Financially,
setting
the
boundaries
recovery
that
was
had not
staggering.
existed before.
The contracts she
This
signed
shift
in the
was
year
visible not
following
only in her
rehab
professional
exceeded what she
choices,
had
but
earned before
also
the
in her
scandal.
personal life.
But
She became
psychologically,
more
the
selective,
comeback carried a different
focusing
meaning.
on stability
Kate
and
understood that
long-term
forgiveness in
sustainability,
fashion was
rather than constant
transactional.
exposure.
No one asked what the
Financially,
experience
the
had cost
comeback
her.
was significant.
No one
The
asked whether she
contracts she
felt
secured
safe
after her
or
return
stable or
demonstrated
healed.
her enduring appeal.
What mattered was that she
However,
still
the
sold products,
experience had changed
still
her
generated
perspective.
attention, still
Success was
carried
no
the
longer
edge that
measured
made people
solely
look
by
twice.
visibility or earnings.
That edge, however, was
Instead,
no
it
longer
became about
lived.
maintaining
It was
balance and
managed.
protecting her well-being
Friends
in an
noticed
industry that had
changes
previously
immediately.
overlooked it.
The woman who once
Over
drifted
time,
through
her
nights without
lifestyle
limits
evolved.
became
She moved
controlled,
away from the
guarded,
fast-paced
deliberate.
environment that had
Parties
defined
were
her earlier
replaced with
years,
meetings,
choosing a
chaos
quieter
with
setting that
schedules.
supported a
The
different kind of
spontaneity that
routine.
once defined
This
her public
change
image
reflected a
became
broader
something she could
transformation
no
in how
longer
she approached
afford.
life.
One mistake had
Wellness,
nearly taken
structure,
everything.
and
She
mindfulness
would not
became
allow a
central to her
second.
daily habits,
This shift
replacing the
extended beyond work.
unpredictability that once
Relationships
characterized her
changed.
world.
The attraction to
Motherhood played a
volatile
crucial
partners
role in this
faded,
transformation.
replaced by a
The
desire for
events of
stability
2005
that would have
had left a
bored her younger
lasting
self.
impression,
She married,
reinforcing the
became
importance
more
of
private,
stability and
and built
responsibility.
distance between her
Her
public
focus shifted
persona
toward
and her
creating a
real
secure
life.
environment,
The industry
both for her
continued to
child
profit
and for
from the
herself.
mythology of
This
wild
perspective
Kate,
influenced
but the
many of
woman
her
herself
decisions
had
moving
moved
forward,
on.
shaping the
Years
way
later,
she
she would
balanced
acknowledge that
personal and
winning
professional
came with a
commitments.
price. She
In later
survived the
years,
collapse.
she began to
She
speak
beat
more
the
openly
scandal.
about her
But
experiences.
survival
While
required
she remained
control,
private
and
in many
control
ways, she
required
acknowledged the
loss.
challenges
The
she had
freedom
faced,
that once
offering
fueled her
insight into the
creativity
realities
was the
behind her
very
public
thing she had
image.
to give up to remain
These
standing.
reflections added depth to her
Legacy,
story, moving
motherhood,
beyond
and the
headlines
quiet
to
cost
reveal a
of
more
survival.
nuanced understanding of her
In the
journey.
years that followed,
Her
Kate
decision to
Moss
establish her
slowly
own
rewrote
modeling
her life
agency
away from the
reflected a
version the
desire to
world
create
expected.
change within the industry.
She did not
Having
disappear,
experienced
but
its
she
challenges
narrowed her
firsthand,
world.
she aimed to
London's
provide
endless
better
nights were
support and
replaced by
protection for
mornings in the
emerging talent.
countryside.
This
She moved
initiative
to the
demonstrated a
Cotswolds,
shift from simply
traded clubs for
participating in the
gardens,
system to
chaos for
actively
routine.
shaping it.
Meditation
Today,
became
Kate
part of her
Moss's
daily
legacy is
structure.
defined by more
Going
than
to
her
bed
image.
early became
It includes
non-negotiable.
resilience,
Losing
adaptation,
control,
and a
once
willingness to
romanticized as part of her
Her story
mystique,
highlights the
was no longer
complexities
an
of
option
fame,
she was
where
willing to
success and
entertain.
vulnerability
Motherhood
often
changed the
coexist.
stakes
It
permanently.
also raises
The threat of
important
losing her
questions about
daughter during the
accountability and the
2005
structures
scandal
that shape
left a
public
scar deeper
narratives.
than any headline.
Ultimately,
It
her
sharpened her
journey
sense of
reflects a broader truth
responsibility
about
and her
survival in
anger toward an
high-pressure
industry that
environments.
had failed to
It often
protect her when she
requires
was
letting go
young.
of certain aspects
When
of
she later
identity
founded
in
her
order
own
to move
modeling
forward.
agency, the
Whether that
mission was
represents
explicit.
loss or growth
Boundaries
depends
would
on
exist.
perspective.
protection
Kate's
would
case,
exist.
It appears to be a
Her
combination
daughter
of both.
and the models
An
who
ongoing
followed
balance
would not be
between
left
who she
alone in
was
rooms
and
where
who she chose
instinct
to
was their
become.
only defense.